Hi, I'm Lisa Singer. I am the editorial director of Brand Insider at MediaPost, and this is Brand Insider BTS, where I get to pull back the curtain on some of the most influential women marketers today. And with me is Heather Spilsbury. She is the CEO of 50/50 Women on Boards. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm so glad you could do this. And when I came across you, I thought, I mean, for people who don't know, Women on Boards, it's basically you're a nonprofit and you're committed to advancing women on corporate boards, just as the title says, and we'll
Yeah.
get into that more as we go. But I just think that's such a wonderful thing that you guys are doing, and to have that as your job, that's amazing. So I really was impressed with that, which is why I'm so happy we were able to do this.
Oh, well, thank you. I know it's a great gig. I will say it has, changed the course of my career, which I'm sure we're going to get into, but it's wonderful to do th something with purpose and to help women in the pipeline to ensure that they have more opportunity.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So, but first we want to get talk with about you. Okay.
Sure.
So as we say, behind the scenes, and I want to get to know Heather more. And so as I said a little bit at the top, 50/50 women on board, your commitment is to really close the gender gap on corporate boards.
Mhm.
And when I look at your site, 50/50, can I say 50/50? Do you ever just call it
Yeah, you
50/50?
can. Yeah, 50/50 is great.
It just seems like 50/50 women on board. It's a mouthful for me.
Yep.
Anyway, I love to snoop, and as I always say, and on your website, I noticed that you have a call to action on your website. It's basically call for bold action, and a number of things are on there, but there are three specific actions that you are looking for corporations to accomplish.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get into that later, but I want to turn it around on you. So the call to action, you direct the companies to do this. So I'm going to direct you to do this. Be transparent. So, all right, was there a time in your career that you felt like you couldn't be completely transparent?
That's a great question. I think it's interesting because I'll share my age. So I'm 47. And when I started working, it was, the 2000s, and you would think at that point that things were different and things had changed, but working in entertainment to start, you could feel sort of the pressure of the difference between being a male in a certain role versus being a woman, right? And so while working in entertainment, you could definitely feel that sort of that distinct pressure. But even then, moving into PR and going to Edelman, which was such a great experience for me and something that I really thought hard about and how I wanted to move my career forward after working at the Recording Academy. So it was very intentional for me to go to Edelman and be at an agency like that had global reach, and I knew I could get really an education in PR and marketing alongside what I had already learned in college, right? So going there, I remember thinking I had just had my first baby, and I was 30 years old, and I was really transitioning my entire career. And I didn't want anyone to know that I had a child because I thought if I tell anybody, they're going to treat me differently. And I looked really young. And so, people thought I was younger, or people thought, so you always had to sort of live up to this thing of like, it's great to look young, but then you have to prove yourself in certain ways. And then on top of that, to tell people that you have a child changes sort of their perception of how you're going to work and how you're going to show up. And I didn't want any of those, um, any of my personal life to sort of play a role in my professional life, and change someone's perception of how I would show up to work. So I didn't tell anybody for a year that I had a
Mhm.
child. And then at one point, somebody saw a picture on my phone and they said, "Oh, who's that?" And I said, "Oh, that's my son." And I think they
Uh,
were really taken aback, like, "Why didn't you tell us you had a kid?" And I said, "Well, because, there are certain things that I think happen when you do have a child. There's projects you don't get, there's events you don't get invited to because they just assume that you're busy or you have something else to do." So I would say that's probably the one poignant thing I remember in my career going, I'm not going to say anything just yet. I'm going to take this role and I'm going to show up like I would for anything because I love working. And And then later we can ease into, what my personal life is all about. But
Yeah.
it was also a time I think where people kept things very separate, right? Personal
Mhm.
and professional life were two different buckets that were compartmentalized. And now I think today, because of, going through COVID and other things, I think we've become more of an authentic workplace in general where people can show up as who they are.
You see the kids running around in the
Yeah,
background, the dogs barking.
right.
I do understand completely. Having most of my career in entertainment,
Yeah.
and the same. You just never. I always looked younger, and people just made assumptions, and I never corrected them. But it's almost stressful. I don't like, and then I would start to hang out with certain people, and then I had to pull them aside and be like, I'm actually this age or whatever it
Yeah.
is. And it's kind of nice when you're when I get together with people who actually just know me. It's like, wow, I don't have to worry about, am I going to slip and say something?
Yeah.
So I do think that that was certainly the case. So I completely can understand what you were saying. I wasn't hiding a kid, but, I completely understand that kind of pressure and wanting to just be treated the way you want,
Yeah.
just as everyone else. But
As a professional, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
completely understand that. Okay, so the next call to action is embrace diversity. Now, obviously,
Mhm.
we'll get into that, but for
Yeah.
you, turn it into name three very different things you like to do for fun.
Oh, that's a great question. So, I mean, I have a close-knit family, and so I think anytime that we get to be together as a family, whether it's during the holidays or whether it's just getting together for birthdays or what have you, that is one of my most favorite things to do. My mom is here in Los Angeles too, and so I have a brother and a sister, and they all have families, and so when we get together as a group, it's really nice because it just it's a good place to be. The kids can play together, we hang out as adults. It's just for me, it's a convening of the people you love the most and
Mhm.
you want in the room, and so that drives me and fuels me. I love going to concerts. I've always loved music, which is why I really enjoyed working at the Recording Academy. It's if I can
Mhm.
see a show, I will see a show. And my range of music is everything from Beyonce to Sturgill Simpson. So, it just sort of runs like the gamut. But I always think music is such a great way to sort of relax and be entertained, and it's just to me it soothes my soul. And then I'm also a homebody. So, I will say I've always loved watching television. Entertainment has always been something that's been a part of me, and I love it. I love finding a show that I really like and getting invested in it and dissecting it. And I think it just does something for your psyche to be able to do something to separate yourself from sort of what's going on in the world or like what's going on in life in general, and just to sit back and relax. And I would say that watching TV is sort of my way of meditating.
Yeah, no, I did. A lot of people say, oh, they don't want to say they like TV or they watch TV, but I do too. I'm the same exact way. I love it. I love getting
Yeah.
lost in it. All right, what's your go-to show currently?
Oh, good question. That's so hard. So we're in between a few right now. I'm watching White Lotus, of course. Severance, we've been watching. I love Top Chef. It's one of the reality shows that I enjoy. Um, those are probably the three that I can name off the bat right now, but
Yeah,
there's so many. And then now there's so many choices that you almost get inundated, and it's overwhelming because you're like, I didn't know that show was on. I didn't, so there's a lot of options.
you don't even know half of the. Someone will tell me about something, and I'll be like, "Wait, what was it?" Whereas it
Yeah,
was easy to find before. But
yes,
so I haven't started watching that yet. Everyone talks about like loving it just as you did, but
yeah,
I just feel like given the description, I don't know if it's going to be like I'm a Hallmark girl. Okay,
yes.
so
It
I
is a little intense, I will
yeah,
say. Yeah, yeah. It's
so
it,
my
it's not, it doesn't it's more of a show for thought, but it can be dark at times too.
yeah, no, that's sort of my what I'm thinking it would be. But
Yeah.
okay, so last one, remove barriers. That's the third call to action. So, all right, I want to ask you, what has been your biggest challenge or barrier that you've experienced, and how did you get through it?
That's a good question. I was thinking about this a bit, and I think that sometimes we experience things that, aren't okay or that aren't fair, right? And that happens in the workplace. It happens, wherever. If I could see it even through my kids, like it happens on the playground. I think the thing that I've always leaned on is my motto is keep moving forward. So you just have to keep going. And so when you come across something that could potentially be a barrier for you, you have to look at it from a perspective of like, is this a learning opportunity or is this a signal for me to move on, maybe try something else or do something different? And that's sort of the way I've always approached it. My parents immigrated here from El Salvador, and that was something that they just instilled in us, like just keep going, just keep moving forward. And they made sure that we had a path to get there, which was in hindsight, you look back and you go, oh, they were doing all of this to sort of protect me, but also to help guide me in a way that you can't really see when you're younger. And so for me, being a woman and being Hispanic was never something that I sort of hung my hat on. It was like, okay, I just got to keep moving forward. And you just do that as long as you remind yourself and you're self-aware that you're not psychologically being, treated in a way that isn't okay and is
Yep.
traumatic. But you just have to keep going. And I think that that's something that people need to use as hope, because sometimes it can be overwhelming if you hit a roadblock or a barrier. But I don't think I've had anything in my career per se that's been something that I never felt like I couldn't figure
Get through.
out.
Yeah. But in terms of, it's a good plan. And I think maybe having your parents had set you up that way,
Mhm.
you do stumble on these barriers because you can take it different ways. You can
Yeah.
hit a barrier and be like, "Ugh, always me," or how am I going to get
Yeah.
through this? Or as you said, you just sort of say, okay, this is an obstacle or this is whatever it may be, a challenge.
Yeah.
And now how do I get past it or around it or whatever it is that makes the most sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and you obviously when it's something, let's say like you don't get the position that you wanted to get, and that can be something that is, devastating in the moment and at the time, but you have to sort of pick yourself back up and work through it. And not to say that I never had times where it didn't feel heavy. It
Mhm.
just is something that you just have to sort of train yourself to go, okay, how do we get through this, get past it, and what is like either the learning or the opportunity that I'm potentially not seeing. I also have a wonderful husband who always says, like, anytime it feels like you're taking 2 steps back, somehow you take 4 steps forward. And I've always been like, that's so sweet. But I think it's also like a testament to sort of how I live my life.
Yeah.
It is, you just you have to train yourself to imagine what you want and then build the roadblocks to get there.
I'm curious, you said, when you were growing up, and this is something your parents instilled in you, and you maybe didn't understand it then, but now
Mhm.
you see the value. Are you trying to, having gone through it yourself, are you trying to instill that in your kids as well? Or are you maybe doing it a little differently because maybe, as you said, you weren't quite understanding it? Like, I'm just curious if that's something that you want to bring to the next generation in the same way.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Both my kids are so very different. So my oldest, I would say, is a little bit more conservative, a little bit more apprehensive at times to dive in, right? And where I have a younger one who's about 9, and you can see it already. He's very independent. He wants to figure it out. He will just keep sort of like mowing through. But you also have to treat that individual a little bit differently, right? So I look at my 2 kids and go, they're very different in terms of personality, and you can tell them so much, right? But my oldest is 18. And so I always say, look, at this point, I'm only here to guide you and to share my perspective because I've been where you are and I see it and I just want the best for you. And so I think when you have those conversations with your kids, you know that they're probably taking a tiny bit of it, but not all of it, right? Because I don't remember thinking, oh, my parents are so smart at 18.
Right.
You just were trying to make your own way. And so you do that with a little bit of humility, but also a little bit of, I hope he's hearing a piece of it. And then with
Yep.
the younger one, because he is so determined, you also have to give them different advice. So it's okay, it's great. You're going to do it yourself, but I'm also here to help you. And to not be afraid to ask for help and to also slow down because I also have that in me where it's like you have this drive and you want to keep going, but sometimes you have to take a pause and you have to look at like what's around you and who's around you and who is that impacting. And so those are things that I think, you try and teach your children. And it's hopefully they hear a little bit of it and hopefully they see you and also can see examples of the types of parents we are. But you can only do so much, and you hope that your kids go have that aha moment, sort of like we all have, right? And go, ah, I understand what they're saying now, even if it's 20 years
That's
later.
what I was going to say. It may not be for about 10 years or so, but it
Right.
does happen. But as you said, you they follow by example, and
Yes.
that's the best that you can do, and then just go from there. So,
Yeah.
okay, so now I want to get into your career. You've sort of touched on it a
Yeah.
little bit and how you started in entertainment. I know you were at E, which I'm also from E at one point,
Great.
and you were doing ad sales.
Yeah.
You then went to agencies. You mentioned Edelman, and you've been to a number of agencies. And
Yeah.
now here you are at 50/50. I'm
Yeah.
curious, going back to when you were graduating, when you were
Hmm.
graduating college,
Hmm.
is this what you envisioned? Was this the career you were looking for, or what were you looking for? And talk about then your path to getting to where you are today at 50/50.
Yeah, it's a good question. Interestingly enough, I started off at Seattle University in the psychology department because I really thought I was going to be a psychologist. And I learned pretty quickly that that was probably not the space for me, given that I'm an emotional person and it was going to be tough for me to get through that type of degree and what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
So I quickly transferred to the business department and just fell in love with business as a whole, and I minored in economics, and I also took a number of marketing classes and realized that was probably where I needed to be. When you graduate, at least for me, because I wasn't in any sort of specific industry, or I didn't have a specific uh, almost how do I put it? Like there wasn't, business can be so many things. You can do you can be an entrepreneur, you can work for an organization and help it grow, you can work on the PR or marketing side or the comm side. So it just sort of depended on what people wanted to focus on and how you wanted to run your career. So when I graduated, I didn't really have a plan. I just knew I wanted to come back to Los Angeles and essentially work in entertainment at the time. Um, and so when I got the job at E Entertainment, it was great. Um, and I was there for a few years, and then I got the call for the Recording Academy through a recruiter, and that
Mhm.
was literally music to my ears because, as I said before, I love music, and so it seemed to me that that was the perfect space for me. I was there for 5 years, almost six, and it was great. It was a good run. It just the way that industry ran at the time, again, it was very male centric. It was very difficult to rise up in the ranks. And I knew that I didn't want to stay in a lower level management position. That I knew for sure. Did I know where I wanted my career to go? Not necessarily, but I did know that I loved marketing and PR. So I thought, okay, where's the best agency I can work at? And I knew that Edelman was one of those agencies. And so, I jumped on the opportunity when somebody in my network actually supported me and helped me and introduced me at the time to Gail, who was then the West Coast regional president, and now she runs Collie Power, the food product that yeah. So she was fantastic and she was lovely, and she said, a friend of so and so is a friend of mine, and she was able to get me in the door and have an interview. And I really I say that I owe my career to both Ron Roker and Gail because they did give me that opportunity. And so I was there for 3 years. I loved it. I worked on the corporate side, which was completely opposite of working in entertainment. I worked for Shell, and I really enjoyed it because it was such a regulated industry that for me, it felt like it was almost putting smart communications together with PR and paid marketing. And we also did a lot of experiential things too. So it was a good run. And then moving forward, you sort of jump from agency to agency, and really it was about title and money. And I spent so much time there that it almost was a distraction aside from, what am I doing and what purpose does this have? And I think
Mhm.
that happens, right? You get in sort of this career mode and you want to keep moving up the ranks and you want to keep making additional, you want your salary to continue increasing. And so all of those things became very important to me. And so that was sort of the way I tracked my career.
Mhm.
Also, it was about the clients too. I loved the business development side. I loved making sure that, clients grew and that we were really doing our job and making sure we were moving the needle. And people trusted me. And so that was also really great because they knew that I was going to deliver on what I said I was going to deliver. And so I found a love for marketing through my agency work. When COVID hit, I was at a smaller creative agency here in Los Angeles that I really helped grow. And I spent a good deal of time, and time away from my family and even my kids to build my career there. And when COVID hit, I don't know if everybody had this feeling, but I had this feeling of what am I doing with my life? And what is this all for? And sort of questioning like where I wanted to go next, because in our field, a lot of clients were also pulling back on their spend with
Mhm.
marketing because of everything
Yeah.
that's going on, and we all know that. So those were sort of the questions I was asking myself, and oddly enough, and I don't know if this was just in the stars, but somebody from 2020 reached out to me. They were looking for a chief marketing officer. I had never heard of the organization. I actually did not know that there was nonprofits that were doing this work to help women in corporate board service. And so all of it was sort of brand new to me, but it was something that was really attractive. And so I got to know the founders. I got to know Betsy Berkmer-Creder, who was the former CEO and is now president, and just fell in love with the mission and just the idea that I could use marketing and all of my experience for good and for a
Yeah.
purpose. And that's really what drove me to the organization in the beginning. And so when I joined 50/50,
Yes,
sorry,
you said 2020 initially, and I'm like,
yes,
is there a
because it was 2020 women on boards. It was
okay,
originally 2020 women on boards, and then they met their 20% goal right when I joined the organization. So I was really brought on to digitally transform it and also rebrand it because of my marketing background.
okay, got it.
So
All right.
So that,
Just
yes. So
clarify.
yes. Yeah, yeah. But thank you for making that clarification because that's important. And so we were rebranding to 50/50, but I took that first year and really treated it like a brand. And wanted to ensure that there was growth and we really moved the needle even from a sponsorship standpoint and also just a visibility standpoint, and also changing the way that we also presented ourselves. When I joined the organization, it was really the majority of the people that were involved with us were white women, all white, which is okay, but you also want some diversity in there. And everybody was 65 plus. And from my perspective, I thought, well, that's also too late for people to start thinking about their board journey. And so we started to change the demographic of the organization and things of that nature. So immediately it was me sitting in this CMO seat and really wanting to better the brand and also represent the brand in the way that I knew we could. And then as the years go on, you realize it's a people business. We have a network of volunteers that makes up about 300 women and men, and you really have to put a lot of emphasis on the people that are supporting you. And so my mindset shifted between 2021 and 2022 and looking at it and going, well, wait a second. It's great that we're marketing. It's great that we have all this visibility, but we really have to nurture the people that are coming through the door and the people that are supporting the organization. And when we put emphasis on that, then it will naturally start to also grow and gain visibility. And I just found a lot of gratification in that work, and I still do. It is something that drives me every day. It almost feels like it's not a job. It is something that I just really enjoy doing and supporting, and the way that people walk through the door and the impression that they have of us and the way they leave is so important to me and to the organization to ensure that we're elevating women, that they walk out with some confidence. And whether they get on a board or not, seeing the transition between the way that they present themselves is something that you really can't put a price tag on.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. As I said, I saw the organization and I'm like, this is really something that's important. And I agree with you that it's you want to achieve that, I'm sure, and any woman who is getting involved does, but at the same point, giving them that kind of confidence, which I think a lot of women sometimes are lacking at all different levels, whether it's
Yeah.
early or as they progress through their career. But I know that you launched, you've done this. This is, I think, your third year, if I'm
Yes.
correct, and it's called 50 Women to Watch for Boards, and your campaign that you're doing that.
Yes.
I want tell us a little about that briefly, but I want to know because it's really about changing the gender gap.
Mhm.
And as you were talking about, as you've been when you've been describing your career, but also making it more diversified in terms of not just white women, all women of color. And why is that? I mean, yes, it's the right thing to do. We all, especially as women, we say that, but why is it the right, why should we pay attention to that? Why do we want to do this? Why is that important?
Yeah, it's a business imperative, really. When you have a diverse board, that means diversity of all levels, right? It's race and ethnicity, it's perspective, it's experience, it's life experience, it's industry. It all comes together in the boardroom. And so when you have a diverse board and diverse perspectives, companies are more profitable and productive. And that is really the key. And that is something we've always said. It really is about business. It's about the best outcomes for a business. And you can see it in the research. When companies have a gender balanced board, their market share is different than others that don't. And so all of the GB boards, which is what we call it, it's gender balance, we just call it GB for short, they outperform their counterparts and their competitors. And that's because they understand that having a diverse board and having those perspectives really helps build a better business. And you have to remember that you have shareholders, you have key stakeholders, you have investors, everybody you need to answer to. And oftentimes, if you only look at something from one lens, you're not seeing the bigger picture. And as companies become more global and globalization is real, that also means bringing in board members from other countries. We have a lot of candidates too. And I'm just using this as an example from the UK who are looking for board opportunities in the US and likewise in the US looking for board opportunities in other countries because they realize that they can add value to that board because of what they've built and done in their specific countries and locations. And that's beneficial to a lot of companies and a lot of boards. And so closing that gender gap is not just about we want representation and we want equality. That's never what we've hung our hat on. It is about what's best for the business. And there are women that are experts in certain fields. And so it can't just be about looking at men or looking at just women or looking at one type of person, right? You have to look at the full gamut of talent and go, who is the best person for this job? And then decide who you're bringing in on the board. And so often I think women are overlooked because of, just the way that society has always been and the way that it is, right? And so we are not the top gender. It's always been males on top. And then you can see the trajectory and how boards also include diversity on their board. Typically, it's, if it's an all white male board and they want to bring diversity, then they'll bring a black man because that's very obvious that they're diversifying their board. And so there's a hierarchy there too with the diversity sort of pull that you go, okay, well, that's sort of the natural progression. But you got to step away from that and go, wait a second, are we looking for the best talent or are we just trying to show that we're a diverse board? So those two things also play a huge role. So to answer your question, we represent women because women are still not represented on boards in a way that they need to be. Of the Russell 3000 companies, women still hold 30.2% of the board seats, which is a lot better than 20 years ago. So we are moving forward and we're moving the needle, but we make up 51% of the population. And then when you break that down into other aspects like race and ethnicity, you have to think about like the population of people that are working in business and are they represented in the workforce and are they being considered for opportunities because they have the merit to do so, right? And boards only hire on merit. So I just want to make that very clear that we don't ever assume that someone deserves a board seat because of their gender or because of their race and ethnicity. We're just saying give people that don't look like you an opportunity who have the experience and expertise. And why? Because it's good for business. And so that's our positioning and where we stand.
Well, that's why I think that's important to clarify because I do think people sit there and say, well, why just because she's a woman, just because, and it's not. It's the bottom line. If a company isn't going to do something because it's the right thing to do, they
Hmm.
will do something because it's good for business. And I think that that's something really worth clarifying.
Yeah.
Because you're having all these different personalities, you want to hear from different races, different genders, all different ages, because that's where you're going to reach so many more in your audience that you're trying to go. I
Yeah.
want to make sure we discuss. So the campaign, tell me
Yes.
a little bit about that.
Yes. So we launched 50 Women to Watch for Boards in 2023. And the reason we launched it was because we have educational workshops and we have events and we have, global events as well. And we help train women and educate them on how to prepare themselves for board service. And then on the flip side, we also partner with corporations to ensure that they're, adding women to boards and that they can use this as a source if they need candidates or people to consider for board service. And so the encouragement is always continue to diversify your board if you haven't gotten there yet. What I realized was it was very difficult for us as an organization to actually show the impact that we were making because someone will go through our workshop, but they also go through other workshops or they're part of other organizations. And so they can't necessarily attribute their board position to us specifically. And so to help showcase what we were doing, but also to help make women who have the expertise to serve on boards right now, public company boards, more visible and to build that candidate list was also something very important to us because we wanted to ensure that we had candidates in the pipeline that we could share when companies say, well, do you have someone that matches this expertise? And just to be clear, we don't place women, but we do want to make sure that they're visible for board candidacy. So this campaign is really for women who are ready for public company board service, but not yet serving on a public company board. And the reason for that is because it's so difficult to get your first public company board seat. And once you get your first, then it's a little bit easier to start to build your network within the board that you're on and then externally, right? So this is an opportunity for women to really get that visibility, to get the education and training, and then of course mentorship. And we have a fantastic selection committee who helps decide on the final 50. And it's made up of nom-gov chairs, chairs of the board, stock exchange leaders, et cetera. So these are all people that have sat in boardrooms, multiple public company boardrooms, and understand what it takes and the value that someone needs to bring to the table. And so they're able to to identify the candidates. And it also for us, it's great because it keeps us sort of out of that selection process, but then we're able to provide them the education and visibility. And of the first cohort, 10 of the women have already secured public company board seats, which we're excited to be able to tout and share. And two of the women from the 2024 group have secured seats, and they just finished their programming. So it's working. What we're doing is working. How we share the candidates is working. We need to increase the demand side of that too and continue to have fruitful conversations with corporations and make sure that they know the list exists. But it's doing its job and we're so proud to see these women go through our program, but also just again have the confidence to say, yes, I am ready for public company board service and to put themselves in a position to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, I totally, I think it sounds, at least from what you're saying, twofold in the sense that you're showcasing these women and you're showcasing, the companies that are either looking or, need to be looking or what it may be. But then for the women, you're giving them, even if they're good at what they do, they're amazing at their position, they
Yeah,
don't, they're not necessarily groomed for being on a board. I mean, there's certain skill sets that you need to go. It's just like promoting yourself. I'm horrible at promoting, you know what I mean? Like, it
right?
doesn't mean that I'm
We
not
all are.
things. So I think that giving women that place to go and sort of learn that, knowing that that's one of their goals is a perfect way for this, for this organization for them to be a part of.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exactly it. You want to make sure that people can see them and you want to make sure that they're also using their network in a way that they haven't before and that they're also making inroads and meeting other people through the selection committee, et cetera, and mentors that are coming through this program to help support them, that they're also utilizing that as a catalyst to help move them in the right direction. Because that's what the selection committee is really there for. Yes, they select the final 50, yes, they mentor, but they also want to help these women. It's a commitment of theirs too. They all serve on public company boards and they know how difficult it is to get there. And so if they can give back, that's what we see as part of this organization. You have women come through and then they potentially get on a board seat and then they come back and they help volunteer their time to help support others, men and women. So it is full circle, and that's what we want to continue to ensure that is happening within the pipeline of 50-50 women on boards.
Yep, pay it forward. Well, I have one more question. We only have time for
Okay.
one more. Go for fun. Not that this hasn't been, but it's just, I just want, what's your guilty pleasure? And we already talked TV, so something
Oh, guilty
maybe you just
pleasure.
need to like sink into your room and
The first thing that comes to mind, and I know this is so funny, but I love chocolate. I love eating one. So like, if I can find a great restaurant, if I can find a great dessert, I'm also gluten free, and I also make a lot of stuff. So I've been cooking my entire life, and also baking, and so I love dessert. And anytime I can have dessert or have chocolate, it's a guilty pleasure of mine. I know that's not exciting, but
no, I agree. Now, is it fancy chocolate or is it, you can just Hershey's or, I like Milk Duds. Like anything,
Oh
like
yeah, I used to
anything
love
that
milk duds. I
go
used
for.
to love those. Yeah, but there's gluten in those, oddly enough. It depends. I junior mints to, fancy chocolate. It kind of,
Damn it.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Heather, that's awesome. And so I love this. I love what you guys are doing. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that and just being able to get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, you too, Lisa. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. And please, if you know anyone, any amazing woman marketer who you'd love me to pull back the curtain on, please let me know and I will do my best to get her. So thank you
Great.
for watching and thanks again, Heather.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.